And welcome into the Bobby Carpenter Show, and what is always a melancholy week after Thanksgiving Day. Everything was set up for the Buckeyes, and unfortunately, they fall to the Michigan Wolverines, 30-24. Schlegs in a game that was back and forth early on. Both teams kind of trying to figure it out there. You can obviously see, that neither one of the offenses really got going early on, but there's a lot of stuff that we'll talk about with that game. Recap some of the other big games that are obviously that went on this weekend as well. Maybe implications there. Is there a chance for Ohio State to potentially get back in the CFP? Could there have been if things happen? Well, we'll see all that. We always get into our tailgate talk, questions from listeners as well. So we answer all of your questions, which I'm sure there are going to be some fantastic ones this week. So Schleg, starting off, your just initial thoughts of the game and what you saw on Saturday afternoon.
Initial thoughts. Okay, so we just didn't capitalize, and we made too many mistakes. That's what it boils down to. I thought the physicality up front, there were drives. We had that one drive where you had 46 yards, 8 rushes. I mean, just moving, dude movers. I was like, man, this is great. It was more yardage than we had in the entire first half. But again, we talked about this last week, Bob, and it came down to the quarterback position, and it came down to turnovers. We said this, like, all being equal, right? Rushing battle, they had 150, we had 107. You take those things into consideration. They also had 69 plays. We had 55 plays. That's what happens when you turn the ball over twice and you set your defense up on a, goal line, inside the 10-yard line opportunity to start the game. I actually highlighted some things. And as I watched the game, like I watched the game at my farm, it started off with this, man, Emeka's drop. Third down. Again, that's how you move the chains.
Keeps the drive going. Going.
That was one thing, right? Then there was the pick on the slant to Mark. That was a bad pass, man. Like, just eat it. You predetermined it. You shot it. It wasn't open. Like we saw later in the game, hit the check down. Boom, go through your progression because it was not there. That's one. That set your defense up for failure. Okay, then you had one that was another one with Burke. They're playing one robber. Got a little antsy, thread the needle. But then that play was very, very close. I actually thought it was not a touchdown. But again, it could go either way. It was called a touchdown on the field.
Malik Hartford, he should have picked it off. He turns his head, he throws it right over his shoulder. That's the difference. If you have, and it's not anything against Malik, he's a freshman, but if you have Lathan Ransom there, a senior, he probably picks that ball off.
Right.
And it's going back the other way. And that's the difference of having someone who is experienced, who's played in big games, who understands, the how big the moment is.
Yep.
And so you felt like maybe you gave one away there too.
Yep. And then you go, right? And we always talking about like win the last 5 minutes of the first half and win the first 5 minutes of the second half. And you go down and you move the ball and then you miss a 50-yard field goal. Now he hits it on the first one and you have some time on the clock, right? It's like, hey, can we move the ball a little bit further? Right now it's 4th and 2, right? So do we want to go for it to move it up? We trust him. All right, let's kick a field goal. He missed the field goal. So now you're going into halftime 10-14, but on a down note, right? So then they come out, they make a field goal. We go down and score a touchdown now at 17-17. The Corm run, that was another one, right? Like the fits, we talked about this on the show all year. Yeah. Fits were solid. And again, in games like this is what people don't realize. Like Ohio State was really good on third down in this game, but they were 3 for 3 on fourth down. Michigan was. And it's just being able to react fast, just like you said on that one that could have been a pick. Just on that fourth down, boom, I hit that hole just a little bit harder. But on that Corm touchdown, Steele was inside leverage. Sonny had to come down. If you just sprint down in there because it's open, you're making a tackle in a phone booth as opposed to making a tackle within 5 yards. But that was another one because he had 88 yards rushing, 20 on that one particular play. Then you go into the fourth quarter, and let's just say, yes, there were 7 minutes on the clock that got chewed up on that. People say, well, you could be more aggressive to get your team the ball back. Well, they end up holding them to a field goal. You still had 1:05 left. You should have fair caught it on that kickoff return. Yep. So now you have 105 because it automatically goes to the 25 anyways. And then you had 2 big plays. And I'm sitting here like, let's freaking go, right? You had the fumble recovery one, the great play to Marvin. Probably should have utilized him a little more, especially when the number 1 corner went out. But again, but then you had the pick. And he got pressure. But that's where, again, guys, in this type of game, when talent is equated, it comes down to those things. There's like 5 or 6 things that I just mentioned that we didn't do, and Michigan played a clean game, and that's why they end up getting the win.
So there's a handful of things in there. I agree with a lot of what you said, Schlegs. You look at the 3 points before half. People got upset with Ryan for not going for it. You're coming off your own 2-yard line. You probably looked at that as you got a free 3 points.
Yes,
Kyle made a great play to Marvin. Honestly, if there's no PI, Marvin probably runs that thing in for a touchdown, and that's 7 points before the half. It's a much different feel. But you get there, it's 4th and 2, thinking, okay, we can make this field goal and let's get it done. You miss that. That's 3 points off the board. You have the interception. That's another 7. So now it's a negative. That's a loss of 10 points right there that you obviously hurt yourself. The field position battle. You mentioned at the end on the final drive, trying to bring it out. We didn't punt very well at all. I mean, we're punting a lot of times from around the 50, could not pin them inside the 10, really get them backed up like they were able to do. And Michigan did a much better job of that. Talked about the turnovers, 2-0. Obviously, the last one, you're trying to make a play and you're getting pressure in your face. So I get that. I understand it. To me, as well, that final drive, it's 13 plays, Schlegs, it's 56 yards. We talked about winning the rushing battle. Even if you talk about giving that one up to Corum, where Sonny loses his leverage a little bit. If he comes down and back hips the ball, it doesn't get out the gate. Yeah, maybe they get 5 yards, but hey, you line up and you keep playing, it's all good. On that final drive, 56 yards, 42 of it was rushing. You lost the rushing battle, Schlegs, by 49 yards. Like that, to me, if you could have got off the field there earlier, that's where that thing all changes. Everything else that happens, if you could get off the field, the 42 yards where they just were bleeding you. And then honestly, you've got to give Sharon more credit. They manufactured some big hits. They ran a halfback pass, explosive gain. They bring in Alex Orji, their backup quarterback, run a little wildcat. Nobody was expecting that. Boom, 22-yard gain. So they're able to chunk the field a little bit and put themselves in some advantageous situations because they knew they couldn't have big plays through the air traditionally with McCarthy. And they also knew that this Ohio State defense was too good to just drive the ball down the field. So they put together some stuff for those two packages to get some hits. And then also on 4th down, I give them credit. They had a lot of nice 4th down plays.
They did.
Especially they're incorporating the tight end. They knew you're going to be in man, some different things, and they found a way to get some matchups. So they did a lot of stuff there that was very creative, and you have to give them credit, but it comes down to execution. Defensively, it's tackling, it's toughness, and it's eye control. Started getting blood a little bit in the second half, getting oozed runs that maybe could have been 2 or 3, turned into 5 or 6. The tackling, missed some tackles in there. And then the eye control coming down, the halfback pass. The one big hit down the middle where Sonny makes the tackle, but I think Proctor should have been in the middle of the field on, I think that was a 3rd or 4th down on play action. I mean, it's little things. And the defense didn't play bad. I said, if someone scored 30, they're going to win this game. I thought 28 would be the number. If you got to 30, it was over. I mean, 31 obviously would have won it for you. But we'll get into a lot more with that. We've got a ton of stuff coming up. We're going to take a look at Kyle McCord, Ryan Day. Is Michigan good enough to ultimately win the national championship? And then also break down some of the other big games that happened this weekend and what that means for the Buckeyes. So stay with us here. I know it's a tough one, but we'll get you through it. The Bobby Carpenter Show on the Big Play Network. All right, welcome back into the Bobby Carpenter Show as we talk and recap the 30-24 loss to Michigan, 14-10 at half. You felt like you were in a pretty good spot, Schlegs. And, diving in a little bit, Ryan Day, Kyle McCord. I mean, how would you assess their performances in this game as far as, schematically on offense and then even, total game management?
Let's start with Kyle. I mean, the biggest thing, as we talked about it, just feed the machine, man. Feed your guys. I mean, Cade, Emeka, Marvin, Trevion. And Trevion, it's really predicated upon up front. And again, people got to remember, like, you have 2 of the top defenses in the country. 4 of those top ones reside in the Big Ten in Iowa, Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. It's up front. And, there were times, man, where we just took over the game. And you're like, man, I feel really good about this. But the ability to sustain that level of physicality and execution, right? So they're both hand in hand. That was difficult. And your job solely based on what I've seen all year is to be a point guard and distribute the football cleanly and make good decisions, because you cannot allow your defense to be put in terrible situations. That's also on the special teams, like you mentioned earlier, Bob. So those all going hand in hand. this was not Kyle's best performance. He did some really good things. There was also the pick on Cade that should have been a pick on Stover on a seam route, right? That he didn't have. And that we've seen those type of balls that he's gotten away with throughout the season. There was one of those in Notre Dame. There was one of them, I think, last week in Minnesota. There was one, they didn't happen, but then they do happen a couple of times. And in the game, right, if you're not going to win the rushing battle, 150 to 107, right, the one thing that you can't do is turn the ball over. And he did in this game. And that's also on the guys to give him time to step up in the pocket and do your thing. That's your job, right? They had one sack. I think we had one sack and another TFL. That's it. That's what happened. So, before I get into Ryan, I'll also say this. I didn't see from the defense, like we saw in the Penn State game, or we saw some momentum from the game in Minnesota, where they really just turned the game around.
Yeah.
We just didn't see that. Was it whether it's a fourth down play, whether it's a third and long play, whether it's a pick, whatever the case may be, we just didn't have that one or two plays that really flipped the script for us, right? They could have happened when their offensive guard went out. Like they ran off 10 points. Like it's just one of those times, man, where a guy has to just step up and make that play to give some juicy offense that just didn't happen. I would say in this game go ahead, Bob.
Well, I mean, when you start talking about Kyle and his performance, like you said, it wasn't one of his best, but he needed to be better than he was.
Yes, he was.
And the second interception, I don't put on him. He's getting hit in the legs. I mean, you can't have pressure like that. The first one, I mean, like you said, you can't throw it. He let the one ball to Emeka float a little bit. But, I expect a lot out of Emeka Egbuka. He's a really good player.
Yeah, really
he drops the first one. You keep the drive going. Maybe that gets a little more confidence. Once Kyle got rolling, you felt like he was playing pretty good after a slow start. And then he kind of floated that one in the seam to Mech, and he gets hit. But that's one that you think a player of his caliber, like you're hoping that he makes that play. And you help out your quarterback a little bit if he maybe just didn't put quite enough on it. You start talking about Ryan and, his performance. I thought he called a pretty good game, mixed up the run and the pass pretty well. What I was probably most impressed with, this Michigan defense was great against the run all year.
Yep.
And if you remember, I think it's the final drive that Ohio State scored. They were ripping them. They put Chip in there. They're going back and forth between him and Trey, and they were pounding the ball down the field. I'm thinking, okay, man, they just scored. They're putting themselves in a great situation right now to be able to go get a stop, get a score, and win this football game. Like they were dominating the line of scrimmage. And so the toughness element was there in parts, but it just didn't feel like it was maybe there the whole time. And like you said, defensively, there was a lot of holding going on in the game.
There was, man. Yes, man.
They were getting now. I will say this: they didn't call any holding up really on Ohio State either. They held their flags in their pockets, so people can complain about that. There was a couple. I'm like, maybe we got away with one, and so they've held them. Now, I think that maybe there was some more going on the edge, and that prevented some of those big impactful plays. The big time sack, maybe a strip, maybe forcing an interception or a turnover there. And you never felt like they were able to get over the top. And so I don't know who you put that on, how that works, but it felt like they were close the whole time. And maybe if you don't throw that interception, maybe if you keep the early drive going, then it changes a little bit. But it's 3 losses in a row, Schlegs, and that's 2 up there, 1 at home. I think the 1 at home obviously stung a lot. This year hurt a lot because you felt like you were in the game till the very end. I mean, how do you assess this? How do you turn this thing around if you're Ryan?
Yeah, very difficult question, Bob. And here's the thing. It's going to be some hard self-introspection of everybody involved. It's like we always talk about, like, it's always about beating the team up north, beating Michigan. 365. That's how you embrace a rivalry. And now it's 3 in a row. What's the difference? Well, in this game, it came down to the execution aspect. Is there something that is on the ownership of the coaches and what they do for their guys to get ready? And not just for the season. I mean, again, the expectation is that you do what you do and you beat every single team in the Big Ten, but you also win this game, because if you win this game, you're going to win all the other games. And so if you're not winning this one, then what has to transpire? How do you get to the guys, right? Because they're the ones that are out there playing, not the coaches. It's all about how do you get to the players to go out there and perform. And I honestly, because I'm not in the building, I don't know the answer to that. I will say this: there's going to be some personnel changes. I want to see some competition within the building, because you obviously need some people that have that chip.
Yeah.
And sometimes you see it and sometimes I don't. And I'm like, the thing is, when you got the chip, like Mick would always say this, man. Unless you have something to prove, you will never improve. Well, guess what, man? Now you've lost 3. You have something to prove to Buckeye Nation and to everybody out there. And I know you wanted to win it for the great state of Ohio and for the fans, and most importantly for your teammates and your coaches. But damn, it's 3 in a row. So now there's going to be some hard conversations. There might be some really kick-ass coaches that got to go. There might be some players that we think that we like, that we should be there, but they don't have the competitive edge that another guy has, and that's what you actually need. And we got to make sure that we can develop them so we have great competition. The hardest thing that you're balancing all this in college football nowadays is the recruiting, the 5 stars, the NIL. There's all those things, and you want to play guys, and you're worried about the portal because that's also depth. But sometimes it's like, you know what? I just need freaking dogs. I need guys that are nasty. Because you saw some stuff after the game from what those Michigan guys were. You'd be kind of like, some people might say, well, I'm offended that that's their type of guy. But you know what? Those guys are playing with some edge.
I mean, dude,
they're playing with some edge, man.
Yeah, you want a dude that's got an edge. Like, you can't be round. You can't be soft. Like, you've got to have an edge. And I don't look at this game, Schlegs, is I don't think it was a toughness thing. I think 2 years ago up there, you know, they pounded the football on us. That was a being. Last year was some big plays. This year,
21.
We ran the football on them at times. We stuffed them at times. We did some really good stuff. Ohio State did a heck of a job at certain points of this game, but you look at the Corum touchdown run. You know, you look at some of the passes that are on defense. You look offensively, some of the critical moments, guys didn't make plays.
Yep.
It came down to execution in critical moments. And the ability of Michigan to do that and the inability of Ohio State to do it at times. Not all the time, but at times. And you've got to figure out how you harden those guys. And I joke, I call it, you know, the shankability factor. Schlegs, like, you got to have dudes out there that this means so much to, like, that they'd be willing to stab another human being for it. Now, they're great dudes. They can go to church. They can be awesome husbands, fathers, all these things. But you have to have someone that it means so much to, that when pressed upon it, like, I'm willing to do whatever it takes.
Yeah.
At all costs. And I'm going to find a way to get it done. And they've got some guys, you feel, and this isn't a blanket statement, because there are guys there that I feel like they have that, but it comes down, I think, maybe, like you said, competition within the building and finding a way to continue to harden those guys. And so that you're mentally forged, because you're going to give up plays. Like, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to throw an interception, but you do early in the game. It's okay. Kyle bounced back. I thought he started playing pretty well. You give up a touch, but defensively, when you go out there, you got to stop him and hold him to 3. Yep. And if it wasn't for the second down run, Schlegs, that gets them about 5, I think they probably do. But you just got to find it. It's the little pieces here and there. It's that edge where it comes down to competition, comes down to all of those aspects, to where you always expect to win, but when it's not going your way, it's not a head down thing. You find a way to get it done. And I'm not sure, like you said, it's going to be introspection. It's going to be a 365, deal. And I don't know how it ultimately, comes about. I know Ryan's going to take a real hard look at it all, and he'll try to get that thing figured out the best that he can. All right. We'll put a little pin in that. We will keep coming back.
We're coming back to it.
There are other games that were going on that thought, okay, even after Ohio State sadness, is there an opportunity to possibly still get in the playoffs? This year, it's much tougher than last, but if there was enough chaos and losses, maybe it could happen. We'll take a look at some of those games and how they shook out and what it ultimately meant for the Buckeyes. All that here on the Bobby Carpenter Show on the Big Play Network. All right, so the Buckeyes end up losing to the Michigan Wolverines 30-24. And it's like, so immediately you start watching some of these other games as you recover from sadness, trying to figure out, hey, it's rivalry weekend.
Yeah.
There's a chance to backdoor in the CFP. The SEC champs getting in. The Big Ten champs most likely getting in. You got Florida State floating around. You've got Texas floating around there. You've got a Pac-12 champ that you think's going to get in. Then all of a sudden I start watching Georgia. I'm like, all right, Georgia, it wouldn't hurt if they had a loss. Any teams at the top picking up losses. They end up taking down Georgia Tech 31-23, but that game was pretty close, and Georgia Tech tightened it up a little bit at the end.
Yep.
Washington State almost upsets Washington, potentially giving them a second or a first loss. So then it would have been them and Oregon both having one loss. Maybe it doesn't put Ohio State in, but it doesn't necessarily hurt. The big one was Florida State, because they're without their quarterback.
Yep.
Jordan Travis goes out. Tate Rodemaker comes in last game, played North Alabama tight early, pull away. I thought in the swamp with Florida there, they take care of Florida had a chance to take care of business. They're up 12-7 at half, Schlegs. And thinking, man, they might be able to ultimately get this done. You give Florida a loss. Louisville got beat by Kentucky. I don't know if the ACC champ ultimately gets in there. And then Florida State pulls it out 24-15.
Yeah. Undisciplined football by Florida. We saw that. I mean, they're 5-7, I believe, on the season. They're struggling. And that Florida one, I mean, like if you look at it, Florida State, like again, we look at all these games and what's coming down the pipeline, right? So you got Oregon, Washington. All right. So guess what? You want Washington to win, undefeated, boom, Pac-12 champ. You want Michigan to win, boom, they're undefeated. I don't want them to win, but I mean, it's Iowa, be chaos, but they beat us, right? So boom, you want them to be in. You want Georgia to beat Alabama. That was an absolutely crazy game. 4th and 31, dude throws it up, no pass rush whatsoever into the back left corner. I mean, touchdown. Like, what are we talking about? But you felt
good because the second loss to Alabama basically would have eliminated them as well. And I mean, Auburn, you want to talk about giving the game away, Schlegs. I mean, you had it. It's
especially coming off the fact that you got beat by New Mexico State last week. Yeah. Okay. Anyways, crazy talk. This is why we love college football. Anyways, so then you had Texas and Oklahoma State. And let's not kid ourselves, man. Like Oklahoma State, they lost to UCF bad. After they beat Oklahoma, they lost to South Alabama.
The thing with the Oklahoma State game, they're playing BYU. BYU has a chance to win that thing. They're leading most of the game. If BYU beats Oklahoma State, then you get a rematch of Red River. Yep. I think Oklahoma has a chance to beat Texas. I don't think Oklahoma State can. So that would have set up something potentially this week that you could have looked at. And that's coming right down to the wire. You feel good about that situation, Schlegs, potentially happening. And then, freaking BYU sucks it off in overtime. Like it was so depressing to see how some of those things ultimately broke and the way that it could have helped the Buckeyes. Now there still is some hope out there. Louisville losing to Kentucky, that eliminates them. If they beat Florida State, I think the ACC champ doesn't get in, but you have that problem looming over there with Texas and they're going to look like, because I don't think Oklahoma State can ultimately beat the Longhorns.
That's the one you're rooting for. I mean, you're rooting for Louisville and you're rooting for Oklahoma State. Like that's the only way in, because I mean, if you think about Florida State, what are their key wins this year? Beat LSU and they beat Duke. So that's it, right? So if Louisville
and they're missing their quarterback. I think part of the committee's thing is they don't want to put teams in, Schlegs, that it looks like a blowout. I mean, they're TV shows. Let's remember that. And so if you put a team in that does not belong and they get toasted, it crushes the TV ratings. It's not good. That's why Ohio State has been consistently getting the benefit of the doubt, because they know what they're ultimately bringing to the table. And they're going to go in there. It's going to be a competitive football game and they have a legitimate chance to win. And there's a lot of eyeballs. Yep. And so like people know how good Ohio State is. You throw a Florida State team in there with their backup quarterback, you're like, okay, yeah, they beat LSU, but that's a different squad. They beat Duke, but that's a different squad because you don't have Jordan Travis, who, is a Heisman caliber type player.
Yep. And I'll tell you what, right now, I mean, like if you're Georgia, you don't want Oregon to win. Oregon's one of the hottest teams in the country right now. They're playing fantastic, right? Because so let's say Washington wins, they're going to be 3. Florida State wins, they'll be 4. There's your top 4, right? If I'm Georgia with their quarterback now, they rushed off. What do they have? Milton.
I'm going to tell you this, Schlegs, unless they smoke Louisville and beat them pretty good, I think there's a decent chance they may put Texas in over Florida State.
I can see that too. Depends. I mean, their one loss is Oklahoma. They beat Alabama, but like the Pac-12 is kind of, I don't know. I'm with you, man. But those are the 2, right? But then if you're Georgia, you're going to play either Texas or Florida State, if that's the case, because then you have 3 unbeatens. That'd be 1, 2, 3, and then Georgia would get, Florida State or Texas.
I mean, I think Oregon, I think they ultimately beat Washington. I think they probably are one of the best teams in the country right now. I still can't believe Auburn had a chance to win last year. They ultimately lost. Yep. They had a chance to win this year, ultimately lost. And there was like devastating end of game situations. We started talking about situational football. I thought, you know what, this is at least going to be a little nugget at the end of the day that you're going to feel a little better about. And then they pull that, they give it away. And then you go in the Florida State or Florida game and you think that's this, hey man, Florida's rolling. They're looking good. Let's not forget Taraja Mitchell's down there, Schlegs, former Buckeye linebacker playing for the Gators. Thought that they might be able to get it done. Man, they couldn't pull anything off. So dude, it was brutal there. And so it sets up a difficult path for Ohio State to get in. So we'll break down that path a little bit more talk a little bit more about this Ohio State-Michigan game. We're going to look ahead to some of the conference championship matchups and how that's going to look, who Buckeye fans should be rooting for, and how that'll shake out. We got that coming up here after a quick commercial break right here on the Bobby Carpenter Show. All right, welcome back into the Bobby Carpenter Show as we try to help you ease the pain of that 30-24 loss with the Buckeyes to the Wolverines up in Ann Arbor. 11-1, not playing in the Big Ten championship game. Michigan will take on Iowa. Iowa's sitting there 10-2 as they narrowly win another one, Schlegs, this weekend. One of the most putrid offenses in the country. But you know what? They won the West. This is probably a fitting way to end the Western Division of the Big Ten. Iowa have any shot over the Wolverines? Or the Buckeye fans, do you even want them? Is it even advantageous for if Michigan would lose?
So it's not advantageous. I mean, they beat you, right? So, I mean, honestly, that's how I look at it. And if you want Ohio State to be in, you want Michigan to win this game because you're not going to go in. Michigan would be the first team to go in, you know? Here's the deal. Iowa has a really good defense, and this is kind of funny. It's kind of comical in the way that we look at college football today, and that you have to score all these points. And here you have Kirk Ferentz, the highest paid person in the state of Iowa. And he had his son was fired this year as the offensive coordinator, and they just continue to win games and honestly, record low, like over under numbers, in Vegas, right? I think this last one was 25.5 points, and they somehow beat that with 23 points in this game. But you know what, though? Here's what Iowa does. They do what they do, which is they play great defense, and it's all about their quarterback. Now, also, this Iowa team got absolutely smoked by Penn State, 31-0, middle of the season. I think it's going to be very similar to that because this Michigan defense is very, very good. One of the best of the country, if not the best. Iowa and this offense, they might piss a drop, but not a lot.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. So, I mean, I can see the number being just like that in the 30s to single digits for Iowa. So.
Absolutely. We got Georgia-Bama, SEC championship. I don't think it really matters who wins there. I think if Georgia loses, maybe they could both potentially get in. So in theory for Buckeye fans, Schlegs, I think you want the Bulldogs to have a clean slate, 13-0, get in. Bama would be 2 losses and they'd be eliminated.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if that's the case, right, and you happen to be that 4 team that set up a rematch for the next year and for the previous year, and guess now you're different players, right, than last year, but still – for us in that Georgia game, I mean, you still have a young quarterback in Beck who was 13 of 20, 175 and a touchdown and an INT versus Georgia Tech. Like there were things that they run the football very well and they play good defense, but that's a really good matchup for us, just like it was last year. They're not offensively as good as they were last year, and defensively we're better. So we happen to sneak into that 4th spot and play Georgia because it's a compelling story that you talked about, Bob. That's not bad for us. So, yes, 100% you want Georgia to win.
Georgia win. Pac-12 championship, Washington taking on Oregon. I don't know if it matters here. Oregon 11-1, Washington 12-0. But I feel like if Washington loses, they might get dumped. So I'm not overly concerned about potentially them, playing spoiler and being a second team from the Pac-12.
You know what? Here's the only thing is I think they have 3 or 4 maybe ranked teams that they beat this year. I totally forgot, like off the top of my head. But then their only loss would be to Oregon, who's probably going to be up there now I think there were 6. They're probably going to be 5. And that one loss happened in a conference championship game, whereas ours happened in the regular season. I don't know how they would take that into consideration, but that's why you just want Washington to win.
Yeah. I think Oregon's the better team, though. That's the thing, is I think they're the better team and could potentially get in there, just because I think they're playing some of the best football that you're going to find anywhere in the country right now.
Yep.
ACC championship, Louisville, Florida State. Louisville losing to Kentucky, I think, helped a lot. Now, if they can beat Florida State, that would essentially eliminate the ACC champ from getting in.
Yep, 100%. And that's what you want. For us, like you need them to go down. You need Texas to go down. Like that's our way in, right? You need Washington to win, Georgia to win, Michigan to win, Florida State to lose, and Texas to lose.
And so then lastly, Texas will be taking on Oklahoma State. We talked a little bit about that earlier. Could have been Oklahoma if BYU could have managed to hang on and win that thing in overtime against Oklahoma State, but Oklahoma State sitting there at 9-3, taking on 11-1 Texas. Texas lost to Oklahoma earlier in the year. They smoked Texas Tech pretty good. It was a close game early. Texas Tech couldn't make any plays, get a pump blocked. I think starts fading on them, and then Texas ramps it up. Do you see any chance for the Cowboys? This to me is going to be the toughest domino to get to fall if you think Ohio State has any chance of getting in.
The answer, it's slim and none, and here's why. Texas ran the ball 43 times for 302 yards against Texas Tech. Now, again, that's Texas Tech. However, they ran the ball for 43 times for 302 yards. Stopping the run is not necessarily Oklahoma State's forte. But obviously, and this is with Texas having their number one running back go down a couple weeks ago with an ACL injury. They're doing it in multiple ways with multiple people. Jaden Blue had 121 yards of that. So they're continuing to roll. Ewers is back. He still had a pick in this game. The thing with Texas is, hey, Ewers, you can't throw INTs. He goes out there and throws one of those, 3 INT type games. Oklahoma State 100% can be in it. But I think Stark will pull them back and be like, we're running the football.
Well, and the one thing you have too in this is it's the final game as the Big 12 is currently comprised, but final championship game. Talk about conspiracy theories. I don't think the Big 12 would be all that upset if Texas didn't win and Oklahoma was ultimately the winner of the last one, while Texas and Oklahoma were still there and still ultimately in it. So I think Oklahoma will be fired up. We'll see if they can, rattle the cage and get it rolling and get that thing going. So that's your conference championship slate this weekend for the Power Five. Obviously, Ohio State not in the Big Ten, unfortunately. But coming up, take a short break here real quick, and then we're going to get to our favorite part. It's Tailgate Talk, presented by All Lines Technology, where we answer your questions, the stuff you really want to know. The number one question on the board, Schlegs, is will or should Ryan Day be fired? We have other ones, though, as well, that we will dive into all after this. It's the Bobby Carpenter Show on the Big Play Network. All right, welcome back into the Bobby Carpenter Show, favorite segment that we do each and every week because it incorporates your questions, the things you want. It is Tailgate Talk, presented to you by All Lines Technology. All Lines Technology is your trusted IT solutions partner in Columbus, Cincinnati, Cleveland, and all places in between, Schlegs.
Yeah, All Lines Technology attacks and dominates in these areas. Microsoft services, cybersecurity services, helpful if you deal with people from Michigan, especially now because they're all over the place. They're coming out of the woodworks. Infrastructure services, managed services, go hit up All Lines Technology. That's all-lines-tech.com.
All right, Schlegs, here's the first question coming to you from Dan Fredericks. People say that OSU played or coached scared. Do you agree? And what do you think UMD did to do something about the play calls? PSU ran it a bit on them, but the defense could not throw. Could it be D-line pressure, great secondary play? I mean, what do you think kind of went on there?
And that was a loaded question, bro. There's like 35 questions.
Yeah, that's like a four-parter.
I'll just say this. I don't think they played scared. I don't think they played to lose the game. I just thought that guys didn't execute. We already broke it down earlier, the situations. The one that Burke had in the end zone that could have been an INT. That should have been an INT before. He should never have turned his head. That could be one, right? The drops. The interception, guys just got to go make plays. I thought the play calling was fine. It was just one. This was the game. We've always said this. Great players have to play great in the game. That's how you win them. Coaches don't win them. Coaches can lose them, but players got to win them. And when you go out there and they call the exact right defense, now we all know. I know what they feel like because I was a coach. It's just go make the play. So that's what it is, man. Guys got to make plays.
It is. I'm with you, though. I mean, it comes down to ultimately making plays in those critical moments we talked about earlier in the show. You have to be able to execute at the highest moment. Yes. This is from Obi Taylor. Should Laurinaitis have a larger role on the defense? Our defense played well all year, but didn't have the hitmen mentality as the greatest of the past. I think he could help get them to play with that edge.
What do you think, Bob?
I think James had a pretty solid role with the linebackers this year. I mean, he basically was the linebackers coach running them. Knowles coordinated the defense. Hopefully with comfortability there, James has some great ideas, some great ways to kind of, probably help culture and help develop some things. I know that they've got maybe to improve a little bit of the cohesion between some of the units, as far as D-line, linebackers, secondary, especially up front, making sure, I think there were some times maybe to go some more 3 down this year, maybe a little, 3 down look with your defensive line, but you have to have the defensive line, going to be, part of it. So there's some things I think that they can do better. And hopefully James will get some of those ideas in there and be able to kind of build those things as far as with the team as well.
I think the biggest thing that James brings to the table, and you've seen it in the linebacker room, is it needs to permeate the defense. And again, like, let's not kid ourselves, guys. This is the best defense that we've had in a very, very long time. This is a top 5, top 10 defense at Ohio State right now. So, like, before we go saying all these things about it, like, yes, you have to execute in the game. The one thing that I think that James has, Bob, and that we all had kind of in the past, and we can only go back to that because that's our experiences, but it's just that mentality. It's the mentality that you're going to fight for every single one. It's the mentality that, here's the thing, that it's 2nd and 8, and that this is a crucial play in the drive. That's football acumen, right? And somebody's got to go make that play. Who's going to make that play, as opposed to just doing what the play is called? That's very different. That's next level. That's something that James is going to continue to be able to bring into the program.
All right. This one is from Football. The narrative of the day was going to be aggressive instead of conservative, but he was anything but. The difference was the first quarter interception, but how can he possibly justify running the clock down and kicking a long field goal before half when they still had 37 seconds left and were moving? And I'll take this at the beginning. And Ryan said it was 4th down. It was 4. If you don't get it, you don't get any points there. You started on your own 2-yard line. You're kicking a long field goal. Yeah, it's high 40s. Maybe it's 50 yards.
It was 50.
50. Dude, you need to have a kicker that can make that consistently. And that's the right play right there. Because if you don't get it, you get 0 points. You had a long ball to Marvin that bailed you out. And really the difference was the field position in the special teams battle is they were able to pin Ohio State deep much more than Ohio State was.
Yeah, all of our drives were very long drives. It was not like you're getting the ball at the 50 or the 40 and driving the football. It was 75 yards, right? Like that one was 56 yards to go kick a 50-yarder. And let's not forget, their kicker made a 50-yard, right? So again, we go back and we talk about, like in Ryan's thing, you get the ball on the 3, you're marching all the way down there. It's 4th and 2. You run it. What are you going to do? Make it a 48-yard field goal, 47-yard field goal, and then call a timeout, maybe run one more play and then get it? Like, are you going to hit a home run on this? Are you going to throw a pick? No, take the points, go to half. You're down by 1.
Well,
you got some juice.
You weren't on the 10-yard line with a chance to score a touchdown. You had a long way still to go, and you could have potentially gotten nothing and not even a shot. Final question here. Are they going to look for a QB in the portal? McCord is an average quarterback. Brown couldn't beat him out. Lincoln is unknown. We've been spoiled with above to great quarterback play for a decade. They took 2 steps back with this QB room.
Will they look at one? Here's the thing, man. I think it's wide open. I think everybody's going to be looking at this. I think you have, Steele and Tommy, they're going to be looking at linebackers. You got, and there's some good ones there, but they're going to still be looking like, at the end of the day, everybody's on notice. I mean, that's coaches, that's trainers, that's strength and conditioning, that's nutrition, that's players. Everybody's on notice, man. Like that's what it is when you come off of losing 3. Everybody's on notice. And if you're not the type of person that they want in the building with a high give a shit factor that's called GSF, then it's time to GTFO, right? Yeah. So GSF to GTFO, and regardless of what that looks like from the portal or recruits developing and taking ownership of that role, that will come in the offseason through competitive excellence. And we will see that, but that will be evaluated. We call it evaluate. It's EAT, right? Evaluate, assess, and train. Like that's what's going to happen. And that's top down, every single person in the building.
I think there will be that. It'll be a lot of these jobs will be open. Maybe the guys hold them. Maybe they're filled outside. Maybe they're filled with guys inside the program as well. But there will be I think a wide open evaluation of everything moving forward. And I don't believe, since the number one question is about Ryan Day, I don't believe that Ryan Day gets fired, nor do I believe that he should be fired. People point out 1-5 against top 5 teams. Well, he's getting to the CFP. He's played well enough to win. They haven't pulled it out. There's reasons for that. Those reasons can be changed, but don't always assume that a change at any position is always for the better, because I've watched people change coaches. I've watched them change quarterbacks, and I've also watched it go the other way. So that concludes our Tailgate Talk presented by All Lines Technology. All Lines Technology, like I said, your trusted IT solutions partner for Columbus, Cincinnati, Cleveland, and all places in between. We're going to wrap up the show next with our final thoughts here on the Bobby Carpenter Show with my man, Anthony Schlegel. All right, welcome into the last segment of the program here as we have broken down 6 ways from Sunday. The Buckeyes 30-24 loss to Michigan, 3rd loss in a row. Tough. We just answered a lot of questions, Schlegs. And, there is one thing that I wanted to kind of talk about. Is, people talk about scheme flexibility. And I know defensively there's some guys that could potentially help him do some different things. Maybe some hybrid roles, stand-up edge dudes. I know CJ Hicks is someone that kind of comes to mind. Mitch Melton is another dude. Like, there's some guys I think that have some unique ability, and people have kind of asked, should there be more scheme flexibility? And I think on the defensive side, that's something that they're also going to have to look at.
Yep. It also goes into personnel. I think you do have those things. And, Baron Browning comes to mind when you say that, because Baron was he was the best outside linebacker in the country, and we put him into a box as a Mike linebacker. But then he goes to the NFL and he starts doing some things. Bob, like you were a phenomenal outside linebacker. And then what do they do when they get in the league? They put you inside the box, where your forte was that. You know what I'm saying? So yeah. The scheme flexibility comes with this. You got to know who are your most talented 11.
And that's you got to figure out. Well, and maybe it's a talented 14 or 15, and you figure out, exactly. Hey, we've got certain guys that can do certain things defensively, figure out how to utilize them. Offensively, they've used a lot of creativity and some different stuff this year. I think they showed some of that in the Michigan game. I was surprised that maybe there weren't some different personnel groupings, maybe some 12 personnel, some 21, some of those things, Schlegs, that we had seen earlier in the year. I know one of the big areas that is going to be worked on to be fixed is obviously that offensive line. They're going to be diving in on that. Played pretty well at times yesterday in the run game. Played well at times this year in the run. Played well at times in the past, but there was a lot of inconsistency there, which led to some of the inconsistency of the quarterback play. Quarterback play is going to have to be better. It'll be interesting to see who comes back off of this team. I would anticipate to think that Marv is gone. Travion's probably gone. I think JT Tuimoloau is probably gone. Outside of that, Denzel Burke maybe as well. We'll see if Hancock and some of those other guys come back. But that's the thing too, man. No team is ever going to look the same as it did the last year. And what do they do in the portal? Who do they bring in? That remains to be seen. But the biggest piece, like as you've talked about, is that competitive excellence, the competitive standard, battling for that within the building at all times. And that is going to be a point of emphasis and focus here in the offseason. I know they have a bowl game left, so we'll get a chance to see some of the younger players and some of the, the guys that will be back, but it's going to be very interesting to see kind of what we see here in the next month. And then obviously the next 6 to 8 as well.
I want to say this is something that's vital. Nobody in the building that's a player has won a pair of gold pants.
Yeah.
That's freaking bumpy. And that's something that has to come, that has to come from the top down. Because if you don't know what it takes to win the game, you don't know what it feels like to get them. And I got 5 and they all are something special. It's like, no, my last one or my first one. No. They're all freaking special because you beat them. You beat them. I don't give those to anybody. They're in my box. When I die, you can have them. Okay? You fight for them. My 05 one was my favorite pair. Okay? That's it. So my favorite kid, you get that one.
I get you 100%, man. And that will be connectivity. I'm sure Ryan's going to take a lot of different ways to look at this and figure out how to solve this problem. Because I know he wants to. I know he's leaned in on it. And I don't wholly attribute this to Ryan. There's a lot of other factors there. And this is a Michigan team that's pretty darn good. We'll see what they can do and if they can win the national championship. And who knows what this weekend holds. But thank you for tuning in. It's the Bobby Carpenter Show right here on the Big Play Network.